Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Combines are rolling and Oklahoma wheat harvest is well underway. We begin today with an update on how it's all going with our small grains extension specialist, David Marburger.
Well, where we're at with harvest right now, the good thing is we're making progress, but overall it's been kind of stop and go for a lot of our producers. If you think back to about when we were in grain fill, we were kind of setting up to be an early harvest this year, but we had cooler temperatures and a lot of moisture during grain fill, which kind of delayed us a little bit, but more back to being back on par.
What are you hearing about yields?
Depending on where we're at in the state, overall the yields have been pretty decent. As we move further south and southwest, we've seen a lot of yields kind of in that mid-30s to mid-50s. As we move a little bit further north, it's gone higher. It's started to go up. And you hear around central Oklahoma, kind of in the mid-40s to mid-60s. And as we move further north, we've heard even better yields than that.
In terms of quality, what are you hearing from around the state?
So just with quality, to start off, we'll just talk a little bit about test weight. Some of those early numbers that were coming in, the wheat that was being harvested earlier on, right around Memorial Day, before that, very good test weights. Reports of 64, 65 pounds per bushel. As harvested started getting going in other parts of the state, again, we were still seeing pretty good test weights, above 60 pounds per bushel. Since then, as we've had some rain events in some certain areas and we've had wheat that's been ready to harvest, but it's been delayed, we have seen a little bit of a drop in test weight, but still pretty good overall, ranging anywhere from hearing reports of 58 to 60 pounds per bushel. Protein levels around the state have been pretty variable overall, but overall a state average, from what I've been hearing, is close to 10.5, 11.5%. We'd like to be at that 11.5 to maybe 12% and a little bit higher, but the protein is really going to be more affected in terms of nitrogen, those applications or lack thereof, as well as other stresses that may have occurred during the season, such as any drought conditions or disease pressures.
So are there any particular challenges with this year's harvest? I mean, we've mentioned the weather, working around the weather, of course, which is always the case.
Yep.
Overall, it's a really great crop compared to the past few years,
yes.
But there have been a few things that have kind of growers have had to overcome.
Yeah, besides the weather, maybe one of the other ones, the other issue has been disease overall. We saw a lot of stripe rust this year. The conditions for it this year were just favorable for the disease, and as we continue to harvest some of our variety trials, we have trials where we've applied fungicide versus where we have not, and we had stripe rust in those areas, and we'll be able to gauge on how well some of those varieties performed where we did not apply that fungicide versus where we did. Other issues have been weeds. Mm-hmm. As well, and trying to keep those under wraps.
Okay. So. And then in terms of your variety trials, you kind of have a few early results, let's say.
We do. So we have 20 locations this year spread all around the state, and as of right now we've got 10 of them harvested. And I'm working hard, our crew's working really hard to get those plots harvested, and then I'm working to try and get those results posted. And I've got some of those results posted on our website, wheat.okstate.edu, and those are mostly from our locations south of I-40, so more western and southwestern Oklahoma. And this past week here, we've been able to venture further north. So we were up at Kildare and Lamont on Monday. We harvested at Cherokee yesterday, and today we're going to Homestead, and tomorrow we hope to go to Lahoma, and Lahoma is our big location, so we're looking forward to that. And again, that's another location where we have our two different trials where we did not apply a fungicide versus where we did, and can look at the impacts of fungicide.
We know the variety trial combine has been busy lately, right? There's been a lot of anticipation about Bentley, which is our new hard red variety. What are some of the things you're hearing about it?
So some of our early results from our variety trials, again, we've started in more of the southwestern part of the state, and overall Bentley has been performing pretty well. But I've looked at some of the data from our results from further north, and it's really been performing very well. You hear that 80 bushel plus, and as well as some other varieties as well. We've been hearing some very good yields, especially in the north, of even some topping 100 bushels per acre.
Wow.
So that's fantastic.
That
We hope
is fantastic.
we hope to continue to hear more of that.
Okay, David, thanks so much for the update, and good luck to all the folks who are finishing up harvest the next few weeks. And for a link to the variety trial results that David mentioned, just go to sunup.okstate.edu. There's a new app for smartphones and tablets that can help producers organize their soil samples. Here's our colleague Brian Arnell to explain.
So after we get done with harvest, we really need to start making a game plan on soil sampling, what fields you've had soil sampled, and the strategies for that. If you're on a field composite where you're taking one sample for every field, really like to see you in the field every 4th year. So about every 4 years you come back to that field. Have a game plan on what fields that's going to be, but it's just as important not only knowing what field you're going to be in, but getting the right soil sample. So if you're on a field composite, you really should take that probe out there and get 15 to 20 cores over the entire field. Doesn't matter what size the field is, 20 acres or 100 acres, if that's what you're sampling for. And make sure your depth is consistent. You want a 0 to 6 inch sample if you're sending it to the soil testing lab. If you're going to another lab, check to see what their depth recommendations are. Some labs determine rates by 0 to 7 or 0 to 8. So really important to know what depth you're sampling at, and also have that soil probe marked with a permanent marker or something on that level for 0.6 for soil testing. If you're using OSU, we've released a new app that should be helpful for producers keeping track of what they're doing. It's called OSU Soil Testing. It's available on iOS right now, and we'll be releasing Android by the end of June. And in that app, you have two ways to use it. One, if you've a producer that have already printed off your barcodes that are used to go to the lab, you can go out in the field that you plan to sample, and you use your phone to take a picture of that barcode. That barcode puts your customer code and the sample number into the app, along with the phone's current lat long, so GPS coordinates. You save that with any notes, so you can name the field and then it saves it. You can save a list for your sampling, and you can email that list to you later, so that you have each sample tied with a location and any notes you may have. If you're taking samples to go into the county office and you don't have that barcodes, you can still use the app. You use it prior to barcode, so it still pulls down your lat long for your GPS and your location. You still apply the notes, but when you go into the county office and they put those barcodes on, you then bring those samples up and you can scan the barcode then, and it'll tie in that barcode to it, so you have a record of what sample goes to what field. This is really also handy in our summer crop this year if you're doing diagnosis. So let's say you go out in the field and you sample a good area and a bad area. You can go in and tie, whether that's soil or tissue, you can tie the sample and say good, Jones 80, bad, Jones 80. So, you know, in a day of soil sampling or crop scouting, I may end up with 10 or 15 soil bags and forage bags in the floor of my pickup. And it very easily gets challenging to figure out which sample goes to where. So this is a nice way to get GPS locations and save that, and then later on create a list and send you yourself that list or whoever you're working with. So most producers in Oklahoma don't have their own customer code. They'll go and take their samples to the county office, which has a customer code, and they have the barcodes already printed off. So in that, the educators can also help keep track. The educators can have this app down and they can keep track of the samples that go through their office if they don't already have a spreadsheet or something. Just one more way to keep track of the samples as they go in, and any identifying notes that go along with those.
Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist, joins us now. Daryl, you've been analyzing the latest U.S. trade data. Let's kind of kick it off looking at the exports.
For the month of April, which is the latest data we have, total beef exports from the U.S. were down about 5% from a year ago. We're still, well, actually that brought us for the year to date down just fractionally. We started out the year a little stronger. It's backed off just a little bit. We're down to most of our major markets. The Asian markets are still pretty weak. The one bright spot in this in the last couple of months is that Mexico has emerged as stronger for exports, and so maybe we're seeing some recovery there.
And then, of course, naturally, let's look at what imports look like.
The brighter spot here is that beef imports, which have been very high the last couple of years when beef supplies were so tight in the U.S., are down significantly. We've imported a tremendous amount of beef from Australia, quite a bit from New Zealand, both major markets, and they're off sharply. On the North American continent, we are seeing some year-over-year increases in imports from Canada and Mexico, but overall, beef exports were down 21% in the month of April. We're down almost 13% for the year-to-date so far.
And then in terms of live cattle, are you seeing some of the same trends?
For Canada and Mexico, most of our cattle trade, we're seeing reductions there as well. Again, shortages of cattle and high prices the last couple of years had brought in more cattle, at least from Mexico. Those are beginning to decrease a little bit. And Canada, we actually imported slightly more slaughter cattle going straight to the packing plant. But in terms of feeder cattle supplies, down sharply. So overall, we're down on feeder cattle. We expect that to continue for the rest of the year.
And I think anytime we are taking a look at a report, it's always a good time to break that down for producers and consumers. What does that picture look like?
Well, in general, the trade picture has behaved just exactly like you would expect the last couple of years in terms of market reaction. Trade is kind of a shock absorber. When supplies were tight and prices were record high in the U.S., we tended to bring in more imports. It restricted exports. As prices come down in the U.S., we see exports start to recover, imports start to moderate. And, again, the other thing that's going on, of course, is the dollar impacts the value of exports and imports. The dollar's still pretty strong, so that hinders exports and tends to support imports. But depending on what the dollar does, we expect this trade picture to continue. It's slowly improving as we go through the year.
Okay, keep us posted. Daryl Peel, we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Those Oklahoma cow-calf operations that have fall calving will soon be weaning those calves if they haven't already done so. The heifers that they're going to keep out of this year's calf crop will certainly need to continue to grow so that they're big enough come next November to go into that first breeding season. We want to remember that these young cattle, as we put them out on pasture this summer, are going to be experiencing a change in the quality of that forage as we go into certainly the last part of summer, July, August, September. And the change is that there will be a decline in especially the protein content in those grasses. We've been fortunate this spring to have enough rainfall across most of the state to where we have adequate amounts of standing forage available to do a good job to help these young heifers grow. But they will need some extra little bit of protein in order to meet our requirements that we want in terms of getting them big enough to go into that first breeding season. The program that I would suggest that you consider if you're going to grow some fall-born replacement heifers this summer is to look at the Oklahoma Gold concept. It's a program that was developed here a number of years ago at OSU, especially for stocker cattle. But the concept is that we use a small package of high protein supplement in the neighborhood of 1.5 to 2 pounds per head per day of a 35 to as high as 45% crude protein supplement, and include in that one of the ionophores, either Rumensin or Bovatec, your choice. As we put that particular kind of package out in the late summer, as the forage quality is declining, we'll certainly get much better utilization by these heifers of the standing forage. They'll continue to grow at 1.5 to 2 pounds per head per day, and then will be more likely to reach your target weights of 60 to 65% of their mature weight going into the first breeding season. Now, if we've got some lighter heifers, some younger heifers that we're concerned about getting them big enough, then you might look at the Oklahoma Super Gold program, and that's one that just uses a 25% crude protein fed in a package of about 3 pounds per head per day, and that'll help these younger heifers get a little more energy as well as protein and do the same job in terms of getting the growth that we want. I would suggest that if you're interested in either one of these late summer supplementation programs, you go to the show links of SUNUP website. That's sunup.okstate.edu. Look under show links, and you'll see there a link to a fact sheet about the Oklahoma Gold supplementation program, answer a lot of your questions that you may have about that particular program, and get you off to a good start of providing the supplement that those young heifers will need to continue to grow in the latter part of summer and into the fall. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Continuing our conversation on Oklahoma snakes, today we want to look at how snakes may impact horses with Chris Heine, our Extension Equine Specialist.
A lot of trails and trail riding typically is in more obviously rugged territory. That's part of the fun of going trail riding, and so it's quite possible to run into rattlesnakes, and there's certainly a number of copperheads prevalent everywhere, so it's possible. The nice thing is obviously horses have kind of a self-preservation instinct, and so they typically will avoid anything that's really threatening. The primary risk though is if, let's say, we're trail riding and they walk over a log and all of a sudden there's a snake on the other side that maybe doesn't have a chance to warn you that it's there. And so then the horse could step on it, cause the animal to strike, or the panic, that maybe is more of a risk. If the horse panics or the rider panics, we want to make sure that we get back away from the snake, but we don't lose control of the horse and lose control of the situation. So sort of a remain calm kind of idea. I don't think you want to panic about snakes with horses, and you have to think about how big they are. This is a large animal. So something that could maybe kill a small dog is not really going to hurt the horse. Horses, the biggest risk factor is if they get bit on the face. Okay, so if they get bit on the face or the muzzle and there's a lot of swelling, it can cause problems with breathing. But in general, if a horse was just out and about and got struck on a leg, it's not typically going to be a life-threatening issue for them. Sometimes people, when they trail ride, will carry rubber hose with them, and that's actually to be able to insert that into the nostril of the horse to keep the airway open. But if she got struck anywhere else on her body, you might see swelling, but it's not typically going to be a life-threatening issue for her.
I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Last weekend was one of rains on the heavier side across western and southern Oklahoma. In the red-colored areas, rain amounts were over 8 inches. Our recent rains have continued to pump up humidity levels. Two different results from higher humidities in the summer are widespread plant disease outbreaks and higher heat risk. Plant diseases thrive when air temperatures are warm and humidities climb above 85%. A map of peanut leaf spot hours gives us an idea of how many hours during the first 2 weeks of June have favored plant disease fungi. If you're wondering why your tomato leaves are becoming more spotted, leaf blight fungi are probably the reason. A leaf spot graph from Chandler shows the steady climb in disease hours since June 1st. Every jump up means a higher risk of foliage plant disease. Sunday, June 12th gave us a good example of how areas of potential heat stress can pop up across the state. A map of wet bulb globe temperature shows a white area with no heat stress, Shawnee, Bowlegs, and Stewart. Those were close to areas of extreme heat risk at Hugo, Valiant, and Broken Bow. When heat risk is high, drink plenty of water and take more frequent outdoor activity breaks. Here's Gary with more on Oklahoma's moisture.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning, everyone. Well, I have some great news. Take a look at this latest U.S. Drought Monitor map released this week. Absolutely no color on the map, so it has been a while, but now we are free and clear for the time being for drought. Now, we do have some bad news, however. Let's take a look at the 30-day rainfall map from the Oklahoma Mesonet, and we see lots of great colors on there, lots of yellows and oranges indicating rainfall amounts from 5 to 10 inches. It's across southern Oklahoma, northeastern Oklahoma, out in west central even. But that's a problem because we also see lots of light greens and dark greens. Now those are areas that have seen less than 3 inches of rainfall or so over the last 30 days. Now take a look at that on the percentage of normal rainfall map, and here's where you get to see the problem. That's in some cases from 60% of normal to even down to as low as 40% or less than normal over that time frame. And that May through June time frame is the wettest time of the year in Oklahoma. So the problem that we get is when we lose out on our primary rainy season entering the summer, and it is blazing hot this week and it looks to continue that way for a while, we could be setting ourselves up for a flash drought situation. And if you look at the areas on that map, that's where we're going to be watching for areas with possibility of drought developing rapidly during the heat of the summer, from central Oklahoma traveling up into north central Oklahoma, and then over into east central and southeastern Oklahoma. So with that good news, bad news scenario, I guess some better news is we don't know if it's going to keep raining after a week or two. If it starts raining again, we won't have to worry about a flash drought. But I think it's definitely something we have to have on our radar, pardon the pun. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
There's a lot of empty bins that are filling up across Oklahoma, and Kim, let's talk about the price of wheat that's going into these bins.
Well, the price hasn't been good this last week. A cash price probably down 50, 60 cents. The market lost 40 cents on the futures price, another 5 to 15 cents on the basis, depending on where you're located around the state. So right now, prices are relatively low comparative to what they were a week or two ago.
What's causing the lower prices, say, over a year or 2 years ago?
Well, if you look over a year or 2 years ago, it's a massive carry-in we've had, and we've got a relatively large crop. If you look at over the last week or so, I think the yields are coming in probably higher than expected. You know, we talked about adequate space, and we thought we had adequate space to put everything. But I think there's some elevators running out of space, and when they run out of space, then they got to lower that basis because they're going to lose some wheat if they have to put it out in bunkers or on ground storage.
So what does the future hold for the price of wheat as we move forward?
Well, I think that we've got, you know, $4.50 on the futures. If we can hold that, the basis, we could lose another 20 cents on it. If we break that $4.50 on that KC July, then we're going to challenge $4.40, maybe $4.30. I've got the bottom there, so that's possibly 20 cents on the boards you could lose, and probably 20 cents on the basis. So you could lose another 40 cents. I think we're going to hit the bottom right in here because Oklahoma's, the majority of the wheat's in the bin. We know what's there. Kansas, we've cut enough to know what's coming in, that it's coming in big. I think that impact's probably already in the market. The market will probably waller around sideways from here, and then I think we're going to get a rally before we get into planting time, because some producers just aren't going to plant wheat if this price didn't go higher, because they're planting at below cost of production. In reality, if they want to, they should just buy the board because they're investing in a loss anyway.
Some of the elevators are still holding on to last year's crop. How will that play into the overall market?
Well, hopefully we got the test weight to blend out some of that low test weight wheat, and hopefully that we'll have protein so we can get test weight and protein. We're going to have to wait and see what's in the bin from this year's crop and last year's crop, and see what we can do to blend the two to get us a good milling quality product.
You always say the third and a third and a third. Is that what you're forecasting this year?
Well, I've been talking about a fourth and 2/3.
Right.
I mean, fourth and 3/4. Get my math right there this year. I would sell at least 20%. You know, it'd have been nice to sell that 20% when we were 50 cents higher. If you know, I had wheat in the bin, I'd probably still go ahead and sell 20, because we do have that 40 cents or so down risk if I can afford the risk. So I'm gonna store more wheat into the fall, because there is a possibility that these prices are going to go higher.
Okay, Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
One of the most common questions about wildlife management involves food plots. To help landowners and hunters have a better idea of how to use food plots, we've created an app at Oklahoma State University. This app is available for free download at the App Store for your iPhone or iPad. Just type wildlife food plots and it should come up. And it includes topics on species such as pheasant, bobwhite, wild turkey, white-tailed deer, and mourning dove, and waterfowl. You can select on each species, and under those different wildlife species there'll be a list of cool season and warm season plants that you can plant specifically for those wildlife species. For each plant it'll tell you about fertility requirements, planting dates and rates, and also some basic information about that plant and how it would be utilized by that target wildlife species. You can save those plants and create lists so that when you go to purchase seed, you'll have those lists ready to go. The one thing I would caution is not to over-rely on food plots, though. This is one small aspect of an overall wildlife management plan. It may help to track game, to help you see more game. In some cases it can provide more nutrition, but it's not a substitute for larger scale habitat management practices such as prescribed fire or timber thinning, timber management. An additional resource that you might want to check out is a practical guide to wildlife food plots, and this is available for purchase on the Quality Deer Management Association website.
That'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Happy Father's Day to all the dads and granddads out there, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.